Hello, dear friends. It is always wonderful to be with you. I look forward to it every single day. I hope things are going well for you. I'm Mark Golub. This is Gam Yachad, together during COVID-19. And again, all of us continue to be hunkered down. And I've said this to you over and over and over again. JBS is with you. And as long as you follow the rules, as long as we all follow the rules, we stay inside, we stay away from people. It's not simply 6 feet. That's the minimum. The best thing is just, what Dr. Alon Moses said, just stay home. And you take care of yourself, and you do wash, and you never touch your hands to your mouth, your nose, or your eyes. Tragically, a lot of people are going to come down with the coronavirus, but it won't be you. So I was on the radio last night, and the calls I received, again, if you were listening on radio, you would have heard it, but I wanted to acknowledge those who called me, and they were so sweet. There was Beverly calling from Florida. We had a lovely call from the Bronx. Do you remember the person's name?
Sheila.
Sheila or
Sharon.
No, I don't remember.
Sylvia.
Ruth is our producer. Ruth is right with me.
Was it Sylvia?
Ruth thinks it might have been Sylvia. I just don't remember, but she was so lovely. All the calls were lovely, and it was just nice to be able to talk with you. And I hope at some point we can do this actually on JBS. So we've been following what's happening here in America, but we've also been following what's happening in Israel. And once again, I am joined by, what a pleasure, this spectacular person who more and more of you now are getting to know and love. He was a long time in the diplomatic corps for the State of Israel, and served in ambassadorial positions, and then served as the media consul here in New York for the Israeli consulate in New York. Then he was with Stand With Us for a period of time, and now he is Senior Vice President here at JBS. It is always a pleasure to be joined by Shahar Azani. Shahar, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Well, it's always a pleasure to be beyachad, to be together, not only today, but always, for we know JBS, it's a family, and family comes together, even though socially distant in these times, Mark.
So how are you doing?
Well, we cope one day at a time. It's not easy. It's not easy on anyone. It's not easy to be away from your routine, from family, from friends. We have family in Israel. We have family elsewhere. Yesterday, we received news that some of people we know well and some relatives have the virus and are hospitalized. Others are coping with stress of keeping, behind closed doors. Of course, the more at-risk population, but anybody.
Shahar, who in your family has come down with the virus?
My wife's relatives who live in Paris came down with the virus, and two of them are hospitalized. She has an elderly uncle who is there, and his son, actually two of his sons. One has already been released, but her uncle is not in such good shape. It's not easy to go through this. Tough, trying times, not easy.
Yes. How about...
I have to tell you something. This morning I dared to do something. I went shopping. I had to get some stuff. And it was amazing to see, with the masks and the gloves and the people all around the building keeping their distance. And what you can really see is the eyes, Mark, the eyes. Because beyond everything and anything, we are who we are. We are who we've been and who we will be even after this, because this is also important to remember. The day after tomorrow will come. This is not going to last forever. We're going to do this for as long as we have to do this. And then we're going to rise and move on. And holding on to that hope and optimism has to be a part of who we are every day.
By the way, talk for one moment. What was it like to go to the market or whatever store you go to in your neighborhood? What was the mood? How were people handling the fact that they were trying to stay apart from each other? What was it like, Shahar?
Well, I have to say eerie. It was very different. It was, you could feel the tense in the air, people keeping apart from one another. Not even, I even felt that people didn't feel like looking you in the eye, things that you would do in general, of have that human congeniality of, hi, how are you? So I made a point of, you pat to the security guard, good morning, thank you. You move on. You have to maintain that element of humanity and that hope. But it is amazing to see the resilience. People were not rushing to empty their toilet paper or empty out everything that's on the shelf. They took what they needed and they waited in lines and they did what was required. And I can only say that I just can't wait for it to be over, for the warmth to come back to our lives,
Yes.
for optimism. Not everybody is as happy as you and I. Not everybody is
True.
able to hold on to optimism.
Right. And by the way, there's some people who are really frightened. And Shahar, there are people who are alone. And I keep talking to the audience, to the JBS family, that I appreciate what it's like to have to be alone at this time. I mean, you're surrounded. Eleanor, your kids are around you. I'm with Ruth, my cousin Skip. And I'm on with either the phone, with FaceTime or Zoom, with my kids who are all over the place in different parts of the country. But I'm not alone. But Shahar, you and I understand that there are people who are alone. Many of them are elderly. And as hard as it might be on you and as hard as it might be on me and our families, it's much harder for people who are alone. And your own comment.
That thought doesn't leave me. Whenever you ask me how I feel going down the street, and I look around and you pay attention, you take a look at the people, and if you encounter somebody who is elderly and walks down the street, my instinct has always been that of outreach and assistance, and that's who we are. That's who we are as people. That's who we are as Jews. That's what our tradition is all about. And suddenly you think to yourself, this thought, that for you to reach out may be risky for the elderly person, because you don't know what kind of state they're in, and you don't want to give them anything but love and warmth. So that love keeps you away. And I think that's the radical change throughout COVID-19, that being distant is loving more rather than being close.
So tell us, you have family in Israel, and Tisha Bader brings us up to date every single day on the JBS News Update. I try to give some information about Israel here on Gam Yachad. But from your perspective, in terms of who you've been talking to and what you've been seeing and hearing, how would you describe the situation right now inside Israel?
I think much like here, the sense of fear and stress as a result of the pandemic. The requirements made by the Israeli government are harsh. The demand of people to stay indoors.
Yes, by the way, what are the requirements now that are being imposed upon the Israeli people by the Israeli government?
Well, the major one of all of this is by taking the restrictions to the next level. You're not allowed to leave your residence beyond 100 yards. And if you do, you need to have a very good reason. It's either medical service or you're going for supplies, and the police will check you. And police officers have given tickets to people who have not done so in order to impose. You try to do it and you try to do it. And I'm hearing just now that two of the main challenges Israel is facing now are with two sectors. One is the ultra-Orthodox sector that has not, for a while, has not abided by the restrictions. And as a result, the level of infection within the ultra-Orthodox sector now is the highest in Israel. The major city, ultra-Orthodox city in Israel of Bnei Brak, has seen a reality in which every third person in Bnei Brak has the coronavirus. This is truly a state of emergency for the city. Right now, it's quite noticeable that in the last few days, up to a week, there has been an awakening within the ultra-Orthodox sector to listen to the instructions and do what's right. as we speak now, Mark, on this day, we have riots in Jaffa by members of the Arab community who were forced, again, as a result of the police coming to give a ticket to somebody who was was not following up, fulfilling the instructions and the restrictions given. And there is rioting on the street with burning tires and violence because of that enforcement. So there is a lot of tension within those two sectors, the Arab sector and the ultra-Orthodox sector. And I think this heightens the level of danger because most of Israel is already quarantined. People stay indoors. They barely go outside. There is, a lot of deliveries. I have to say one more thing. It's interesting to see, if you remember the geopolitics for a minute, and you think to yourself, what does Israel look like to Americans, to us, when we are here in the U.S.? And you always hear from people who are less in the know, who will tell you, oh, it is so dangerous, oh, things are terrible, yes. As if you have, roaming explosive camels on every street corner, and you have to really keep cautious. So it's kind of like the opposite now. In Israel, they keep on asking me, how are you doing? New York is the epicenter. It's ground zero. Everything is, falling apart. The news that's coming, it's terrible. So it's interesting to see points of perspective. I'm not saying things are lovely. They're not. There is a lot to face, and the situation is quite frightful on many levels. But it's interesting to see perspectives from
That's fascinating. That is fascinating. All right. So we shift gears. We go from the health chaos to the political chaos. Bring us up to date now. Where do things stand from your perspective? Give us sort of an overview of how any potential government is shaking out. I believe I've seen that Netanyahu has also been in the company of somebody who was infected, and he himself is in quarantine. But Shahar, bring us up to date.
Well, first of all, the good news is that he has been exposed. He was exposed a couple of weeks ago, and it is in a couple of hours. Today, he's actually leaving quarantine. So he'll be out in the open, free to do what he must do. And part of what he must do is establish that national unity government that we mentioned last week, after blue and white split into two factions, with Lapid and Ya'alon on the one hand staying in the opposition and leading the opposition, and Benny Gantz along with Gabi Ashkenazi, the two former chief of staffs, are leading a faction of 17 members who are negotiating with Netanyahu to form the next government. I do want to mention one thing. Today is April 1st. So caveat, I'm not doing any April Fool's Day, not in the mood for that. But April 1st was also the day. Today, Prime Minister Netanyahu starts his 12th consecutive year as Prime Minister of Israel after winning the elections on 31st of March 2009. And why is this election important in 2009? Because then Kadima, the party that was established by people who were former Likud members and led at the time by Tzipi Livni, whom I don't know if you remember, was foreign minister and others. So she, even though she won the elections and she won more seats than Benjamin Netanyahu, she failed to form a coalition government. And she was rendered the head of the opposition, while Netanyahu created at the time in 2009 his famous bloc, which included the right-wing parties, the ultra-Orthodox, and at the time, Avigdor Lieberman, who had 15 seats in the 2009 Knesset. Now, why is that important?
By the way, stop for one moment. Why did she fail?
She failed because she did not create the coalition she needed. So the principle in Israel, it doesn't only matter how many seats you get in the Knesset, the bloc, or are you able to get the support of other parties that together will form the coalition with you. At the time, reality was so upside down, she wasn't even able to garner the support of the Labor Party and Meretz to recommend her to the president. So the situation was such that the president at the time, Shimon Peres of blessed memory, when he had to give the task of forming the government to a political leader, even though Tzipi Livni, the head of Kadima, had more seats than Likud, Benjamin Netanyahu had more members of Knesset recommending him to the president to form the government. So he was given the task, and he established a government.
Okay, again, I just want to make sure the audience understands. She failed, and in part she failed because she could not garner enough general support in the Knesset.
Correct.
And the question I'm asking you, what was it about Tzipi Livni that in some way prevented people from, surrounding her? And there was at the time, there was also an attempt to really replace Benjamin Netanyahu, and those who supported Tzipi Livni really thought they had won a victory. And then she failed. It had something to do with what? What about Tzipi Livni was the problem?
Well, I think in that case, remember, Netanyahu was coming back from exile. It was 2009. It was his big return, his comeback to the Israeli politics after losing to Ehud Barak in 1999 and after Ariel Sharon's departure as a result of the stroke in 2006 and Ehud Olmert's assuming position, and then his criminal charges, by the way, the indictments against Olmert. Olmert quit very early on, even before he was officially indicted in court. Netanyahu has a lot of political energy, has a lot of political wit. So there are two elements here in play. One is, of course, Tzipi Livni's personality, and she was not a very outgoing person who was able to have those relationships. But more importantly, you have what we see today as Netanyahu's political wizardry. He was able to see ahead, and even though on that night of the elections he won less seats, he was very quick in fomenting and garnering support of his friends in various parties in order to make sure that it's going to be his government that's going to be formed, his coalition, his natural allies. And think about this. If Tzipi Livni was unable to garner the support of Labor and Meretz, the left-wing parties, in order to create a coalition, then her failure was miserable. And I think Benny Gantz today looks at her experience, sees her success in the polls and her popularity with the Israeli public at the time, and she was a few steps away from becoming a prime minister, and she failed. He does not want to repeat the same mistake.
Okay, pick up the story now. Where is Gantz, and how close is he? How close are we to a real unity government, Shahar?
Well, first of all, I think that we are close. There is an element of political negotiations and give and take, which is natural, especially given that you're dealing with Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been doing it for a day or two. And at this point in time, there are three major points of contention between the parties. One is who is going to be the Minister of Justice. The Likud are interested in certain people. Blue and White, by the way, they kept the name. Blue and White are interested in other people, and there is a bit of a back and give and take on that issue. Second element is who is going to be the Speaker of the Knesset. Likud is interesting to bring back Yuli Edelstein. Blue and White mentioned that they're not very happy with that, bearing in mind the clash that happened between Yuli Edelstein and the Supreme Court only last week. We forget very quickly. And the third element here is Likud is interested in moving forward with the plans for annexation as the Trump peace plan indicates, those territories which are under full Israeli control, and Benny Gantz and Blue and White are not entirely there. They're not willing to commit to agreeing to that annexation at this point. And the last element that's been in contention was there is going to be an appointment of a new Attorney General. The current Attorney General, Avichai Mendelblit, who was Secretary of the Cabinet and a close confidant of the Prime Minister, was the one who signed off on the indictment against the Prime Minister in court. Soon his term will expire and there will be a need to appoint somebody else. Blue and White have demanded the Ministry of Justice. They'll get the Ministry of Justice, but Netanyahu and Likud are still interested in maintaining some sort of a veto power so that if there is an applicant or a candidate who is not to their liking, they're able to veto it. So these are small yet important issues. However, under the current circumstances, it's difficult for me to see a situation where there is no unity government. I think both sides are playing poker. Blue and White, and Netanyahu is dilly-dallying. He's waiting a little bit. He's taking his time. Blue and White announced this morning that if there is no progress in the negotiations, they will present the anti-Netanyahu legislation in the Knesset. Remember, Mark, Benny Gantz is the Speaker of the Knesset today.
Yes, but in essence, does that give him any long-term power? He's only the Speaker until this unity government is formed, correct?
Well, he is the Speaker. He was elected as the Speaker. So it does give him leverage. He does have control over the work of the Knesset. That's very important for the government. He is able to move forward things, even if the Prime Minister is not interested in moving forward with those issues. So that does give him some leverage. His main issue is this. He already gave Netanyahu the gift of splitting Blue and White before signing off on the agreement. So that gives Netanyahu some power over Benny Gantz. Remains to be seen what's going to happen, because we go back to our discussion of last week, Mark. What are the options of the Israeli politicians? Going for a fourth round of elections? I think the Israeli public will find this inexcusable, and anybody who does so or is held responsible by the Israeli public will pay a dear price in the ballot.
What about Netanyahu's legal problems? Where do they stand now? Does the coronavirus get in the way? And ultimately, there's supposed to be a unity government, as you described last time. And after a period of time, a year in September, then Benny Gantz becomes prime minister. But that means that Netanyahu will remain prime minister until then. And the question is, do the legal charges against him in any way jeopardize creating a unity government?
So the legal, first of all, let's mention this. You're talking about the corona implications on the legal system. It's interesting to note that under the decree of the Minister of Justice, the courts in Israel closed down for the duration of the pandemic, and right now until May of 2020. So that created a delay because Netanyahu's trial was supposed to start on March 17th. So yes, it did have an impact. And the legal issues that Netanyahu is facing has been a major, major issue in the elections. If you remember, Blue and White's main promise that they breached by joining Netanyahu was, we will not sit under a prime minister who is criminally indicted in court. And this is the main reason Lapid and Ya'alon gave for not moving forward with such a unity government. So yes, it does play a role. However, we have to remember this. The Israeli law does not require an indicted prime minister to quit. The Israeli law stipulates quite clearly that the prime minister may continue to assume his position as prime minister until a verdict is reached. So as long as Netanyahu needs to manage his legal affairs and manage the country, supposedly there is no problem. The major claim of the opposition was, that's going to take so much of your time, that's going to take so much of your focus. And if you think about what we just spoke about, he's focusing on the appointment of a Minister of Justice, of an Attorney General, not a Minister of Health, not a Minister of Foreign Affairs, by the way. It's amazing. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has always been perceived to be such an important docket for any politician. And now it's like Blue and White, they have it, they're willing to give it up in exchange for. So it's you can see the impact of the virus. I'll also mention to you that it was Litzman, who is ultra-Orthodox, who holds the docket of Minister of Health, and Blue and White have made an attempt to get the Ministry of Health for themselves because they understand the importance of such societal issues in these times. There has been reluctance on the side of Litzman to give it up, and Netanyahu has to manage. I do think there will be a national unity government.
Yes, by the way, that's my last question for you.
Yeah.
Take 30 seconds. Shahar Azani, will there be a unity government in the immediate future?
Yes.
There will be.
There will be. Okay. And I'll tell you what, Netanyahu has to juggle. He has to juggle Blue and White, but he also has to juggle his own right-wing bloc, because the right-wing parties, Naftali Bennett and others, are saying, hey, if it's not going to be a right-wing government, even though it's headed by Netanyahu, we have issues. And he even has to manage his own political leaders within Likud who are expecting a senior position, which they're not going to be able to get. So he has a lot of votes.
Okay, but you really feel the bottom line is there's going to be a unity government?
I do feel there is going to be a national unity
Okay.
government, yes. We're not accustomed to clear-cut answers, right? It's like, and I've made a decision, nobody's a prophet, but if I need to tell you today, Mark, do I think there's going to be a national unity government? I'll tell you, yes.
Okay. As always, it is so wonderful to talk to you. We will talk often. You're also going to be doing some programming of your own here on JBS, so people should look forward to seeing you. You, Eleanor, your kids, be well. We will stay in touch. As always, it is wonderful to have you with me, Shahar. Thank you.
Watch them out to all and happy to be together, beyachad, during this time.
Be well. Shahar Azani, isn't he just wonderful? So let's look at the most recent coronavirus numbers. In the United States, more than 210,000 Americans have been diagnosed with the virus. More than 8,800 recoveries, which is now up to 4%. And there are roughly 4,700 American deaths. In Israel, there are only 6,000 diagnosed with the virus. There's 226 who've recovered, with only 25 deaths, less than half of 1%. On the one hand, very upsetting numbers, but the bottom line is, if we follow the rules, we have more than a 90% chance of surviving this pandemic. And I hope that's true for every single one of you. I expect it to be true for every single one of you. Again, I am so pleased that there are many of you who are responding now to our invitation to write to jbscommunity@jbstv.org and share with us any events in your life, a simcha, a birthday, an anniversary, something you want to, just say mazel tov about or to someone you love. Send it to me. I'll be honored to add it here to JBS. And if there's a sadness, if there's someone who's ill and you'd like me to mention it in the context of a Misha Berach, or if there's a yortzeit or a passing, please send me the individual's name. I like to know the person's relationship to you. Who is it to you that you are asking us to remember or to think of or to say mazel tov to? Do that. And again, I'll be honored to read those names on JBS. Our address one more time, jbscommunity@jbstv.org. We are a family, and it's an honor to in some way recognize the people who you care about and whom we should care about. So please email me. By the way, if you want to email me personally, please email me at Rabbi Golub @jbstv.org. I will try to respond to any of you who email me. Thanks as always to our director, Sloan Copeland, and to the producer of this edition of COVID-19, Gam Yachad, Ruth Golub. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Stay safe and be well, my friends.